They didn't just follow orders, they redefined cruelty. At Płaszów, Commandant Amon Göth would step onto his villa balcony, rifle in hand, and shoot prisoners at random below, sometimes for perceived slights, sometimes simply because he could. At Auschwitz, Irma Grese, barely in her 20s, patrolled the camp with a whip reinforced with wire, using it to terrorize prisoners she selected at will. At Bergen-Belsen, Josef Kramer presided over a camp where starvation and disease consumed tens of thousands. Later known as the Beast of Belsen, he enforced order without mercy, maintaining control as bodies piled up around him. These were not battlefield soldiers or distant bureaucrats. They were the men and women who looked victims in the eye and chose cruelty, again and again. This documentary reveals how the Nazi system deliberately created guards who thrived on violence, how ideology, power, and reward transformed ordinary people into some of the most terrifying figures of the Holocaust. And once that transformation began, there was no limit to what they were willing to do. The Nazi system did not search for natural killers. It constructed them through deliberate, structured pathways. The journey for many guards began not in adulthood, but in childhood. Youth organizations like the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls served as the primary indoctrination channels. Membership swelled, particularly after 1933, when rival groups were banned, making participation less a choice of fervent belief and more a pragmatic step for social acceptance and advancement. This created a vast pool of young individuals whose worldviews were malleable, shaped by a curriculum that blended nationalism, physical training, and racial ideology. Amon Leopold Goeth's path exemplifies this engineered progression. He joined the Nazi Party's youth wing in 1925, years before he entered the party itself in 1930. In Austria, where the Nazi movement operated illegally for much of this period, such early affiliation signaled more than conformity. It reflected an ideological commitment. In 1930, he joined the Austrian SS, receiving an SS number and stepping onto a formal track within the organization. This was not an impulsive leap, but a gradual, step-by-step immersion into the Nazi apparatus. The system provided a clear professional trajectory for men like him through formations like the SS Totenkopfverbände, the Death's Head units. For individuals facing limited economic prospects, this offered a powerful incentive: a stable income, a uniform symbolizing authority, and a place within a rigid hierarchy. This hierarchy was meticulously designed to activate and reward specific behaviors. Obedience was paramount. The gradual dehumanization of designated enemies was systematically encouraged. New recruits were not immediately thrust into the heart of a death camp. Their transition was incremental. Initial postings might involve guarding political prisoners or participating in less extreme forms of persecution. Each step increased their exposure to institutionalized violence, normalizing cruelty as a routine part of their duties. The system agitated existing prejudices, embedding them in a structure where callousness was not just accepted, but expected. Women entered along parallel tracks. Irma Grese, Elisabeth Volkenrath, and others moved from the League of German Girls or civilian employment into the SS women's training centers, often lured by pay, status, and accommodation. Training at places like Ravensbrück was short, directive, and focused on hardening recruits. Few female guards were party members. Incentives and hierarchy did the heavy lifting that ideology alone could not. By the time an individual received a posting at a camp like Płaszów, the foundational work was complete. The values of the system had been internalized. Brutality was no longer a shocking act, but a professional duty, a logical endpoint of their training and conditioning. Cruelty became a routine component of the camps not by accident, but through meticulous, bureaucratic design. The concentration camp system was rationalized under the SS, with Dachau serving as the definitive model for all subsequent camps. This adoption involved restructuring existing camps to align with Dachau's layout and procedures. Non-SS guards were dismissed and replaced by soldiers from the SS Death's Head units. Uniform methods replaced improvisation, with power centralized under Heinrich Himmler and the SS. Extreme brutality was not left to individual impulse. It was engineered into daily operations through rigid protocols. The SS Economic and Administrative Main Office, the WWII, centralized funding and oversight, treating the camp network as a managed enterprise. Organization was standardized, with clear divisions for command, prisoner control, labor, and logistics. The machinery was simple and relentless. Design elements served punishment. Roll calls stretched for hours in any weather to break prisoners psychologically. Forced labor was calibrated to drain strength while extracting value. The camp's architecture, watchtowers, barbed wire, strict zoning, turned space itself into an instrument of domination. Personnel training reinforced this design. Guards were conditioned to obey without hesitation, to escalate rather than question, and to apply punishments by rule. Violence was structured into schedules and reports. Infractions produced expected consequences. Discretion narrowed to cruelty. The Kapo system deepened the effect. Selected prisoners were made responsible for supervising others, distributing labor, and enforcing discipline. Delegating power downward multiplied surveillance and punishment while reducing SS manpower. The result was a pervasive distrust and terror among the prisoner population, with fear radiating from both guards and fellow inmates. This bureaucratic machinery took ideological commitments and translated them into daily routines. Forms to fill, quotas to meet, punishments to deliver. The Dachau model solved scale. It made atrocity predictable, administratively ordinary, and reproducible. Camps became interchangeable components within a single system. Procedures could be exported, personnel rotated, and results measured. A commandant arriving at a new site did not need to invent methods. He inherited a manual, a chain of command, and expectations calibrated to produce terror efficiently. Within that framework, individual actors could still leave their mark. Some pushed the system's allowances to the limit, using the structure to magnify their own brutality. Others learned that conspicuous violence advanced careers. Promotion and prestige followed those who enforced policy with maximum effect. The architecture of control was fixed. What varied was how far a man was willing to go within it. Amon Göth's progression through the Nazi hierarchy demonstrates how the system actively identified and promoted sadistic behavior. His journey began with youth membership in 1925, leading to his enlistment in the Austrian SS by 1932. He was not a prominent figure initially. His rise was fueled by his demonstrated brutality in earlier assignments, including overseeing the liquidation of Jewish ghettos and smaller camps like the one at Tarnów. His effectiveness in these roles, measured by a ruthless efficiency, marked him for greater responsibility. The system rewarded his particular talents. His appointment as commandant of the Płaszów concentration camp in March 1943 placed him in a position of absolute power. Upon his arrival, he immediately asserted his authority, reportedly announcing to the prisoners, "I am your God now." This declaration set the tone for his command. Goeth exercised his power arbitrarily and publicly. He was infamous for his daily, indiscriminate murders. He would often observe the camp from the balcony of his villa, armed with a rifle, and shoot inmates he deemed to be moving too slowly or resting. For seasoned prisoners, the sight of his distinctive Tyrolean hat became a signal to attempt to hide, as it indicated his readiness to engage in this deadly pastime. These shootings were not merely acts of violence, they were ritualized displays of dominance. They were psychological weapons designed to instill a constant, pervasive terror. The act of shooting from an elevated position reinforced his total control over life and death, making every moment in the camp yard a potential death sentence. His actions were meticulously documented in survivor testimonies, which described the casual nature of his brutality during routine inspections. His violence was integrated into the daily functioning of the camp, becoming a normalized feature of the environment. Goeth also enforced a brutal system of collective punishment. He would order the execution of entire work crews if a single member escaped or committed any infraction. This practice maximized control through terror, ensuring that prisoners policed each other under the threat of group extermination. His sadism extended to using his trained dogs, a Great Dane named Rolf and an Alsatian mix named Ralph, to maul prisoners to death. The system did not merely tolerate this behavior. It agitated his latent propensity for cruelty by placing him in a context where it was not just permitted, but expected as a demonstration of authority. His actions solved a specific logistical need for the Nazi regime, the need for commanders who could enforce a reign of terror efficiently and without moral hesitation. How did Amon Göth evolve from a youth member to the commandant of Płaszów? His trajectory illustrates the mechanism by which an ordinary individual could be transformed into a monster. The system provided the opportunity, the permission, and the rewards for extreme sadism, channeling personal brutality into official policy. His story is a case study in how a structured environment can cultivate and unleash the worst human impulses. Amon Göth's balcony was not merely an architectural feature. It functioned as a stage for a calculated form of psychological warfare. From this raised position, he could observe the entire compound. For the prisoners below, the balcony represented a constant and imminent threat. They existed under the perpetual fear of being targeted by his random, whimsical shootings. There was no predictable schedule or identifiable transgression required to trigger an attack. Göth would appear, rifle in hand, and fire without warning at individuals he selected arbitrarily. This practice served no military or disciplinary necessity. Its purpose was symbolic and strategic. The shootings reinforced Göth's absolute authority and systematically dehumanized his victims. By treating human life with such casual disregard, he communicated that the prisoners were not people but objects existing solely at his whim. Survivors recalled the paralyzing terror that gripped the camp whenever Göth took his position on the balcony. The sight of his Tyrolean hat was enough to send prisoners scrambling for cover, knowing that any movement or the lack thereof could be interpreted as a death warrant. Life became a precarious balance where simply being visible could mean execution. These acts were public spectacles. They were not carried out in private or hidden from view. The sound of the rifle shot and the sight of a collapsing body were meant to be witnessed by everyone. This public nature was integral to the tactic. The intended audience was not just the immediate victim, but the entire prisoner population. The goal was to break their collective will, to crush any lingering sense of resistance or hope. It created an environment where survival depended on invisibility and luck, not on obedience or hard work. This method also shaped the guards. By normalizing extreme public violence, Göth established a baseline of brutality for the camp staff. It set a standard where cruelty was not just accepted, but expected as a demonstration of control. For the Nazi administration, this tactic solved a practical problem. Maintaining order through sheer terror reduced the need for a massive guard force. A few men, empowered to kill arbitrarily, could control thousands through fear alone. What made Göth's ritualized balcony shootings so psychologically devastating was their arbitrariness. They were the ultimate expression of capricious power. In a system already defined by rigid rules and harsh punishments, he introduced an element of random horror. Prisoners could follow every command perfectly and still be murdered. There was no logic to evade, no behavior that guaranteed safety. This unpredictability produced constant, debilitating anxiety. That psychology did not belong to men alone. The machinery could recruit women into the same logic of domination and reward. Irma Grese shows what that power looked like when wielded by a young woman given rank, latitude, and an audience. Known to prisoners as the beautiful beast, and also as the blonde angel and the blonde angel of hell, she became one of the most infamous female SS guards. The female guards of the SS challenge assumptions about gender and violence. Women were not merely bystanders or clerical staff within the extermination apparatus. They were active perpetrators. Grese's trajectory stands as a stark example. She joined the SS auxiliary forces as a young woman, initially working at Ravensbrück, the primary concentration camp for women. Her performance there, marked by an aptitude for brutality, led to promotion and a transfer to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the epicenter of genocide. At Auschwitz-Birkenau, she was promoted to Oberaufseherin, the second highest rank an SS Aufseherin could achieve, and at age 20, was given command over approximately 30,000 women prisoners. This progression was not accidental. It was a reward for demonstrated ruthlessness. Her background was strikingly ordinary. She came from a modest agricultural family, a beginning that contrasted with the sadism that followed. The dissonance fed her nicknames among prisoners. The labels captured the jarring contradiction between her youthful appearance and the cruelty she exhibited daily. As Oberaufseherin, she wielded sweeping authority over the female prisoners in her section, presiding over their suffering with methodical dedication. Grese's methods of inflicting pain were both brutal and personalized. She carried a whip made of cellophane with a braided wire end. Survivors testified that it slashed open women's breasts, causing deep wounds that became infected. The whip was feared not only for the pain it delivered, but because some injuries were less immediately visible, giving her a measure of deniability. She used it indiscriminately, striking prisoners across the face and body for minor perceived infractions or no reason at all. She also used a leashed, trained dog to attack inmates on command, turning daily movement into a landscape of threat. Testimonies from survivors, including Dr. Gisela Perl, who worked in the camp infirmary, describe Grese's involvement in calculated torment. She inserted herself into selections on the ramps, deciding who was fit for labor and who would be sent to the gas chambers. She was known to taunt and abuse prisoners undergoing medical procedures, adding psychological agony to physical pain. The system agitated ambitions like Grese's. For a young woman with limited prospects, the SS hierarchy offered pay, housing, status, and a clear path upward. Promotion tied directly to a willingness to be cruel, to show no empathy, to treat human beings as disposable. Grese seized that incentive. Her rapid ascent was the product of performance measured in terror. What distinguished her was not rank alone, but the specific instruments and methods she selected to enforce domination. Those choices turned authority into a signature form of fear, and they set the stage for how she operationalized it. Irma Grese amplified her brutality through a deliberate and personalized selection of instruments. While guards were issued standard equipment, she chose tools that maximized psychological impact and physical agony. Her use of a cellophane whip became particularly infamous. This was not a simple leather strap. It delivered a sharper sting, opening deep, searing cuts. At times, the injuries were not immediately visible, granting her a degree of plausible deniability. She could assault a prisoner, leave them in agony, and yet the marks might not be obvious at first. That ambiguity compounded the fear. Victims knew what she had done. Others, including some supervisors, could pretend they did not. Her second primary weapon was the use of trained attack dogs. She kept one or two huge dogs, often German shepherds, which she commanded to savage inmates. The presence of these animals created a constant, low-level atmosphere of threat across work sites and barracks. Prisoners understood that a single word from Grese could unleash a mauling. During work marches, those who stumbled or could not keep pace risked being set upon. These attacks were not merely physical assaults. They served as public signals of domination, reducing human beings to prey and broadcasting that mercy had no place in the hierarchy. These tools were extensions of her method for control. They were not mandated by SS regulations, but reflected her particular brand of sadism. The cellophane whip and the attack dogs became her signature. Personalization was central to their effect. It made the violence feel unpredictable and tethered to her mood, rather than an impersonal enforcement of written rules. Within the Nazi system, such initiative was not discouraged. Creativity in inflicting pain could be read as zeal, and zeal translated into authority. The regime's logic found efficiency in this decentralization of terror. By allowing guards like Grese to cultivate their own methods, the system extracted maximum fear with minimal resources. A guard who could invent a distinctive punishment became a more effective instrument of control. Psychological warfare spread horizontally. Each overseer added a unique layer of dread, ensuring there was no safe routine, no predictable path through the day. In practice, Grese used the whip for sudden, public beatings across the face and body, often for trivial reasons or none at all. With the dogs, she commanded them to latch onto arms or legs and drag victims to the ground. Survivors described the dread of working under her gaze, knowing that a gesture, a glance, or a misstep could trigger an attack. Her tools were not simply implements of pain. They were calculated instruments designed to break spirits, making resistance seem futile and compliance no safeguard. There was another kind of terror in the camps as well, less theatrical, more administrative, and no less lethal. Josef Kramer embodies that model, a career SS officer whose title became a brand of terror, the Beast of Belsen. Josef Kramer's legacy is tied to his command of two of the most infamous camps in the Nazi system. His career path reveals a different facet of camp administration than the personalized sadism of an Amon Göth. Kramer was a bureaucrat of death. Before his posting to Bergen-Belsen in December 1944, he had served as commandant of Auschwitz II Birkenau. Promoted to Hauptsturmführer, captain, he held that post from May 8, 1944 to November 25, 1944. It was a significant promotion, placing him at the helm of the most efficient killing center in the Nazi Empire. His reputation was built on cold, administrative efficiency. At Auschwitz-Birkenau, Kramer was known for meticulous management of the camp's most horrific functions. He oversaw selection on the railway ramps, where arrivals were instantly divided between those deemed fit for labor and those sentenced to immediate death in the gas chambers. He supervised the logistics of gassing and the subsequent disposal of bodies. His approach was marked by a detached, professional competence. He was not described as taking personal pleasure in the suffering he administered. He treated mass murder as an operational problem to be managed with precision. His transfer to Bergen-Belsen in December 1944 presented a different kind of horror. Bergen-Belsen was not officially an extermination camp with gas chambers. It was designated as a reception and exchange camp. By the time Kramer took command, it had become a dumping ground for thousands of prisoners evacuated from frontline camps as the Reich collapsed. Conditions deteriorated catastrophically. Overcrowding was extreme. Supplies of food, water, and medicine were virtually non-existent. Kramer presided over this collapse with the same bureaucratic mindset he had applied at Auschwitz. His approach at Belsen was one of profound indifference. While he did not actively torture prisoners for pleasure, he failed to take meaningful action to alleviate their suffering. He managed the camp's administration while a typhus epidemic raged, and prisoners died by the thousands from starvation and disease. His crime was one of omission as much as commission. He saw the piles of corpses and the emaciated living, and continued his routines. The system rewarded a man who followed orders without question, who viewed human life as a logistical variable. This is why Josef Kramer became known as the Beast of Belsen. The horror he represented was not the fiery sadism of a Goth, but the chilling banality of bureaucratic evil. He was a family man and a careerist who found advancement in managing extermination as workflow. That normality is what makes his actions so unsettling. The machinery needed managers as much as executioners, people who could keep selections, transports, and quotas on schedule. And that leads to the figure who turned those selections into a clinical, daily procedure. Maria Mandl's tenure reveals how individual authority could turn extermination into a routine governed by ritual and paperwork. Maria Mandl, spelled without the final E in many records, was Oberaufseherin, the senior overseer for women at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and she exercised that power with practiced precision. Maria Mandl's role within the Auschwitz-Birkenau complex illustrates the system's relentless pursuit of clinical efficiency in the killing process. As an Oberaufseherin, she held one of the highest ranks attainable by a female guard, placing her in direct command over the female prisoner population. She had held positions at other camps before arriving at Auschwitz, where she was named the female commandant of the women's camp. Her duties were vast, but her most significant function was direct involvement in selections. On the railway ramps and within the camp, she held the power of life and death over thousands. Her decisions were made with a detached, almost administrative precision. She would assess the physical condition of new arrivals and existing inmates with a swift, practiced eye. A limp, a cough, or appearing too frail could be enough for her to gesture toward the line leading to the gas chambers. The process stripped human beings of individuality, reducing them to a fleeting impression of fitness for work. To this horror, Mandl added a uniquely cruel psychological layer. In October 1942, she was transferred to Auschwitz, and under her authority, she established the Women's Orchestra of Auschwitz. This was not cultural enrichment. The orchestra, composed of prisoner musicians, was forced to perform during roll calls as work details marched, during selections, transports, and even executions. The sound of marches or classical melodies provided a grotesque soundtrack to the trauma of families torn apart and victims sent to their deaths. The practice amplified suffering, creating a jarring dissonance between the veneer of order and the reality of industrialized murder. It was a calculated act of psychological torment designed to disorient and break the human spirit. Mandl's career path demonstrates how the SS identified and promoted individuals for their capacity to carry out such tasks with steady efficiency. She began at Lichtenberg and Ravensbrück before her transfer to Auschwitz in October 1942. Promotion to a senior position at the heart of genocide followed her demonstrated effectiveness. She handled the immense psychological pressure of selections without visible distress. That emotional detachment was a valued asset. The system agitated ambitions like hers by placing select personnel in positions where they could decide human fates continually, solving an operational need. Extermination required staff who could perform horrific tasks consistently, day after day. Her approach went beyond gestures on the ramp. She maintained order, managed the flow of prisoners, and ensured the procedure ran to schedule. Individuals were processed like components on an assembly line, with Mandl acting as a kind of inspector, separating those temporarily usable from those marked for immediate destruction. The machinery was relentless. From that logic of inspection and throughput, another figure pushed the model further, away from visible sadism and toward the optimization of killing as a technical workflow. Franz Stangl's career represents the ultimate perversion of professional competence. His role was not to inflict personal brutality, but to perfect the mechanics of extermination. As commandant of the Sobibor and Treblinka death camps, He oversaw the murder of hundreds of thousands. His focus was relentlessly logistical. Stangl was an engineer of death, obsessed with optimizing the killing process for maximum efficiency. He often described victims as cargo, a telling glimpse into his industrial mindset. This approach was honed during his earlier involvement in the T4 euthanasia program, where he gained experience in the administrative management of systematic killing. At Treblinka, Stangl introduced a series of coldly practical changes designed to accelerate the machinery of murder. He oversaw the construction of larger, more efficient gas chambers to increase capacity. He streamlined the movement from the arrival ramps to the gas chambers, reducing bottlenecks that caused delays. He imposed tighter scheduling and improved methods for disposing of the enormous number of corpses, a central logistical challenge. Every aspect of the camp's operation was analyzed for potential improvements. His goal was a seamless, factory-like system where the transition from arrival to death was swift and orderly. He took pride in a well-run camp, a concept rendered monstrous by its purpose. Stangl's public image reflected this sterile efficiency. Prisoners and staff noted his distinctive white linen uniform, a detail that earned him the nickname the White Death. The uniform was crisp, immaculate, and at odds with the horror he directed. The contrast reinforced his identity as a manager, not a spectacle-driven sadist. He supervised processes, measured outcomes, and treated murder as workflow. Stangl was not flamboyant, he was a manager. Operation Reinhard required individuals who could solve the practical problems of killing on an industrial scale. It needed men who could treat annihilation as a series of engineering and administrative puzzles. Stangl's skills in organization and logistics were precisely what the system valued. His advancement was a direct result of demonstrable efficiency in this horrific task. In post-war interviews with Gitta Sereni, Stangl displayed chilling detachment. He said, "My conscience is clear about what I did myself. But I was there. So yes, in reality, I share the guilt. Because my guilt, only now in these talks, now that I have talked about it all for the first time." The words expose a man who compartmentalized his actions to an extraordinary degree, acknowledging presence while insisting on a clear conscience about his personal role. He died of heart failure 6 months after receiving a life sentence. Stangl shows how the machinery needed managers as much as executioners, and how efficiency itself became a metric of success. The system took professional pride and redirected it toward annihilation, turning technical competence into a path forward. The system's promotion criteria revealed that sadism was not merely tolerated, it was a valued professional trait. The efficient operation of the concentration and extermination camps depended on guards who could dehumanize victims and administer violence without question. The bureaucratic machinery needed reliable cogs, and it identified them by their demonstrated hardness. This created a self-perpetuating cycle. The system promoted the most brutal, who in turn enforced a standard of extreme violence for those under their command. How did the Nazi system reward and promote guards who demonstrated exceptional cruelty? It incorporated sadism into its very definition of merit. Professional success within the SS hierarchy became inextricably linked to a willingness to commit acts of terror. This alignment of personal ambition with institutionalized violence ensured a steady supply of individuals prepared to operate the machinery of the Holocaust, turning moral corruption into a career advantage. The pursuit of power within this structure demanded the abandonment of humanity. As the Reich collapsed, a parallel infrastructure moved in the shadows. Post-war escapes, the rat lines. The collapse of the Third Reich did not mark the end for many perpetrators. In the chaotic aftermath of the war, a significant number of SS guards and camp personnel sought to evade justice through clandestine escape networks known as rat lines. These routes, often operating with startling efficiency, provided a pathway to anonymity and freedom in distant countries, primarily in South America. Their existence signaled a deliberate effort to shield war criminals from Allied tribunals and emerging international law. The logistics were precise. False identification papers, often Red Cross travel documents obtained through deception or sympathetic intermediaries, provided new identities. Travel moved through safe corridors, frequently via Italy or Spain. Elements within the Catholic Church, most notably Austrian Roman Catholic Bishop Alois Hudal in Rome, played a documented role in facilitating these passages. Hudal assisted fugitives with shelter, funds, and crucial papers, helping them slip past border controls and onto ships bound for the Middle East or the Americas. The agility and secrecy of these operations complicated the already immense task facing Allied investigators. Franz Stangl, former commandant of Sobibor and Treblinka, was among the most prominent beneficiaries. Detained by American forces in 1945, he later escaped custody and, in May 1948, used a rat line to reach Syria. With continued assistance, he then moved on to Brazil in 1951. In Brazil, he lived under his real name and found steady work at Volkswagen do Brasil's plant in São Bernardo do Campo. His flight demonstrated both the depth of the support networks and their reach across continents. A man directly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands rebuilt an ordinary-seeming life far from any courtroom. His case was not unique. Numerous lower-level guards and SS functionaries followed similar paths, disappearing into new societies across South America and the Middle East. The rat line solved an immediate problem for fugitives: survival and evasion. They offered chances to avoid execution or imprisonment, to erase the past with new papers and new addresses. The cost fell on justice. Dispersal across borders delayed accountability for decades. International investigators faced fragmented records, contested identities, and communities unwilling to cooperate. For survivors, knowledge that their tormentors lived freely deepened the burden of memory. The unresolved nature of these escapes left a lasting scar on the post-war reckoning and exposed the durability of networks that persisted well after 1945. Even so, pursuit did not stop. States, courts, and prosecutors assembled cases from testimonies, transport lists, and the few documents that survived. The next phase would test whether law could reach across years and oceans to confront the crimes. Courts took up the task in public, formal settings. The pursuit of justice, war crimes trials. The pursuit of justice for the crimes of the Holocaust began almost immediately after the war's end, with international tribunals and national courts seeking to hold perpetrators accountable. The scale of the task was immense. Trials like the Belsen trial in Lüneburg and proceedings in Poland aimed to prosecute camp personnel based primarily on the harrowing testimonies of survivors. These processes were not merely about punishment. They established an official, public record of the atrocities. They brought the systematic nature of Nazi genocide out of the shadows of the camps and into the light of a courtroom. This legal reckoning, however, encountered profound challenges from the outset. Evidence was often fragmented, scattered across a continent ravaged by war. The chaotic nature of the camp system, the destruction of documents by the retreating SS, and the sheer number of victims and perpetrators created a labyrinth for investigators. The most complex challenge was the dispute over identities. The case of John Demjanjuk became a stark illustration. Initially identified as the notoriously brutal guard Ivan the Terrible at Treblinka, his extradition and trial in Israel were mired in conflicting survivor testimonies and a lack of definitive proof. He was convicted and sentenced to death, but the Israeli Supreme Court later overturned the verdict due to reasonable doubt, underscoring the immense difficulty of achieving certainty decades later. For some, justice moved swiftly. Amon Göth, the commandant of Płaszów, was captured by American forces in 1945 and tried before the Supreme National Tribunal of Poland in Krakow. The case relied heavily on survivor accounts detailing his arbitrary shootings and extreme cruelty. Found guilty of mass murder, he was executed by hanging on September 13, 1946, at Montelupich prison in Krakow. His fate demonstrated that where crimes were abundantly documented, retribution could be immediate. Irma Grese faced judgment at the Belsen trial. At just 22 years old, her youth stood in shocking contrast to the brutality of her actions at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. The court heard detailed evidence of her use of a whip and attacked dogs, and her role in selections. She was convicted and, along with Josef Kramer and others, was executed by hanging in December 1945. Grese was the youngest war criminal hanged under British authority in the 20th century. Kramer, tried alongside her, met the same end for his role as commandant. Despite limitations, these trials galvanized public awareness. The testimony forced the world to confront the mechanics of the Holocaust. They met a pressing need for symbolic justice, provided a measure of closure, and articulated a collective condemnation rooted in law. They also exposed the boundaries of any courtroom's reach when confronting crimes on such a scale. Against this backdrop, the boundaries of legal redress became stark. The limits of accountability. Despite public trials and executions, the pursuit of justice for Holocaust crimes faced hard constraints. The sheer number of individuals involved in the SS and its associated organizations, particularly the vast network of the SS Totenkopfverbände responsible for the camps, made comprehensive prosecution nearly impossible. In the chaos of post-war Europe, countless guards evaded detection. They discarded uniforms, adopted new identities, and blended back into civilian society. For every Amon Göth or Irma Grese who faced a tribunal, many more returned to ordinary lives, their crimes unknown to neighbors and colleagues. The legal process itself was fraught with obstacles that hampered accountability. The case of John Demjanjuk illustrates the difficulty of attribution. Extradited to Israel and tried as the guard Ivan the Terrible, from Treblinka, he was convicted and sentenced to death, but the Israeli Supreme Court overturned the verdict for lack of certainty. Survivor testimony from decades prior, however credible and courageous, could not meet the standard of proof. Later, newly surfaced records linked him to service at Sobibor, leading to a conviction in Germany. The arc of the case exposed a core problem. So much evidence had been destroyed or scattered that the law struggled to match names, roles, and crimes with the required precision. Even when perpetrators were identified and tried, outcomes were not always proportional to their deeds. In West Germany during the 1950s and 1960s, courts at times handed down lenient sentences. A broader reluctance to confront the recent past shaped legal culture. The defense of Befehlsnotstand, duress, was often accepted too readily, allowing defendants to claim they were merely following orders under threat. This environment meant that many who participated in the machinery of genocide received minimal punishment, if any, despite extensive documentation of systemic cruelty. For survivors, the elusiveness of justice deepened the wound. Knowing that tormentors lived freely, their crimes unacknowledged, compounded the trauma of loss. It solved nothing for those who had endured the camps and then faced a world unwilling or unable to hold all perpetrators to account. The imperfections and limitations of the post-war justice system meant that full accountability was rarely achievable. The gap between the ideal of law and the reality of its application left a legacy of unfinished business that still shapes historical memory. Yet absence from a docket did not erase what happened. The most enduring record came from those who saw and suffered, whose words preserved what files could not. Their accounts carried the weight that courts could not always bear, and they brought the machinery of murder down to the level of a single face, a single day, a single command. The most poignant and definitive indictments of the camp guards come not from legal documents, but from the testimonies of those who endured their terror. These accounts document the daily reality of life under the absolute power of figures like Amon Göth and Irma Grese. The bureaucratic language of camp administration, with its talk of transport lists and labor details, stands in stark contrast to the raw human suffering recorded by survivors. Where official records might note a death, a survivor's memory captures the specific dread of Goth's balcony or the distinct crack of Grese's whip. These stories ground the immense statistics of the Holocaust in the intimate, personal experience of fear. The psychological impact of this arbitrary violence did not end with liberation. The trauma inflicted by the guards persisted, shaping the entire lives of the survivors. Many suffered long-term psychological wounds, nightmares, hypervigilance, survivors' guilt, and an inability to trust institutions that had once promised order. The systematic dehumanization and constant threat of sudden death left deep imprints that lasted for decades. For many, the memories of a commandant's casual cruelty or a guard's specific method of torture remained as vivid years later as the day they occurred. The terror was not confined to the boundaries of the camp. It followed them into their new lives, a permanent shadow cast by their tormentors. The resilience required to survive such an ordeal and then rebuild a life stands as a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure. These survivor voices perform a critical function for the historical record. They provide irreplaceable evidence that no archived document can replicate. The testimony of Kitty Hart, a survivor of both Auschwitz-Birkenau and Bergen-Belsen, illustrates this powerfully. Upon arriving at Belsen and recognizing the familiar faces of her captors, she recalled the old gang, Kramer, Grese, and the rest of them, must have been sent there from Auschwitz. We knew what to expect from such creatures. This statement does more than confirm a personnel transfer. It communicates the chilling continuity of brutality, the profound terror of knowing that the same individuals who perfected cruelty in one camp were now in command of another. Her account personalizes the machinery, giving it a face and a name. By sharing their experiences, survivors agitated the post-war consciousness. They forced the world to confront the human reality behind the numbers. 6 million is a statistic. The story of a single individual hiding from a commandant's rifle is a human tragedy. These narratives solve the problem of historical abstraction. They ensure that the actions of the guards are understood not as abstract evil, but as specific, deliberate acts inflicted upon real people. The survivors' stories are the ultimate safeguard against oblivion. From those testimonies comes a clear mandate for how we end this story. The transformation of ordinary people into agents of terror was a deliberate, engineered outcome of the Nazi system. Understanding this mechanism, from systematic recruitment to bureaucratic rewards for cruelty, remains essential to prevention. The industrial scale is stark. Approximately 1.3 million people passed through Auschwitz. About 1.1 million were murdered, largely Jews and Soviet POWs. The numbers expose the terrible efficiency of a process designed to manufacture monsters. If this exploration of history has impacted you, subscribe for more in-depth analyses of World War II. Your engagement helps preserve these crucial stories. The past's lessons remain vital to navigating the present. If this story moved you, challenged you, or helped you see the Second World War differently, it would be an honor to have you join our growing community. Subscribing isn't just a click. It's a way to support more powerful stories, more forgotten voices, and more truth from the past. So if you believe these stories matter, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep building this journey together. And don't forget to leave a comment. We read everyone and love hearing your thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring history with Epic War. Keep asking questions. Keep seeking the truth.